Let me know that you all can see it. While you're here, put a like. That'd be great. If you hit the like button, that's awesome. It kind of like lets folks know that I am doing this. I am going to post this on Instagram as well. So give me like 2 seconds just so I can make sure that folks know, because I messed up. Because that's what happens. Hey, y'all, I posted the wrong link. Click this one and join the chat. Okay. I appreciate y'all being patient. Hold on. How's everybody doing? I don't see nobody typing in the chat. Y'all just came here to learn, huh? I want this to be a little bit more interactive. So let's see how that goes. All right, so we're doing Juneteenth, the legacy of freedom fighting. And I am Dr. Michelle Taylor. I am also known as FemJones. I appreciate you all for being here. Juneteenth is so important to me. I have been celebrating Juneteenth for the majority of my life. I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to be raised by folks who love their culture and love things like this. So I learned at a young age all about Juneteenth. But what I realized was that a lot of people had not. And it's like been one of my personal missions to make sure that people know everything they need to know about Juneteenth. Well, not everything, but a lot of things, right? So when we do these kinds of teach-ins, just remember that you are only going to get but so much, right? So let's get into it. Let me close that. All right, so here we go. All right. So I do have agenda. I do have goals. That is how I am. I am a teacher. So I do these kinds of things. We're going to talk about Africa in the beginning. We're going to talk about resistance in the colonies. We're going to talk about the Civil War for real. There's a lot of misinformation about the Civil War. Shout out to Nikki Haley, who was just like, it's about all these things that aren't slavery, which was very weird. June 19th, 1865 to January 23rd, 1866. I'm going to talk about some gradual manumission laws. I want you to remember these dates because they do become important. I'm going to talk about how people celebrate Juneteenth across the United States. I'm going to talk about Juneteenth as a federal holiday and like, what do you do, right? And then at the end, we will have Q&A. All right, so a little bit about me. I am, I think you can see my shirt. It says Africology. I am a professor, doctor of Africology and African American Studies. Our program is Afrocentric. So everything that we talk about, everything we educate about is coming from a position of putting African people at the center of their own narratives. So I do not rely on the stories that other people who are not us tell. Everything comes from us and our understanding comes from us, okay? I'm also a public speaker. I am an activist, a retired social worker. I'm all these things that a lot of people know, but my passion really is African-American culture and history. All right. So some of the goals are to expand your knowledge about Juneteenth, the holiday, expand your knowledge about the fight for emancipation, expand your knowledge about the cultural practices related to Juneteenth, and make sure that you know what you're talking about in public. That's all I really want. Like, I am so tired of people being unsmart in public. So my hope is that you're going to at least walk away today with 3 things that maybe you didn't know, but 3 things that you can share with folks and be like, hey, I learned this on Juneteenth. All right. And at the end, we'll have questions. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. All right. So in the beginning, there was Alkebulan. What is Alkebulan? It is the original name of Africa. And we always have to start at Africa, right? We always have to start at Alkebulan. We have to start at the origins. Why? Because that is where we are from. And so much of African-American history is taught as though it started only with slavery, right? But we are descendants of people from across the continent of Africa, largely West Africa, but there were many people who were moved from the east to the west during the Arab slave trade. The Arabs would trade in people to and trade and sell and traffic people to the Europeans, who eventually brought us to the Western Hemisphere. I don't like to call it the New World, as they say. Again, that is a Eurocentric way of viewing, but they came to the Western Hemisphere, and so that's what we learned. It's important to know that before people of African descent were enslaved, they were whole people with whole lives and civilizations and culture and values and traditions and rights and all of those things. As much as Europeans tried to remove them from us, they maintained. And that is why we end up having a legacy and celebration like a Juneteenth that relies heavily on our cultural memory. Okay. So one thing that I love to talk about and to remind people of is that Black people, African people, did not just accept slavery. They did not just accept their condition. African people resisted. And I'm going to call people African throughout this. Please just accept it for what it is. Okay. I have images here. You can see there were advertisements about insurrections, Negro insurrection in Tennessee, Great Slave Stampede in Missouri, another stampede, right? In Kentucky, horrid massacre in Virginia, which was actually Nat Turner's rebellion. What they call a horrid massacre, some people look at as an act of liberation and freedom, right? It all depends on who's telling the story. In the middle here, I have a picture of Denmark Vesey. Denmark Vesey was president. Oh, I didn't say president. He was a preacher. And, you know, there was a lot of the folks who resisted were religious folks, right? And they understood, even though they were only given parts of the Bible and that they were denied full access, they still understood that there was a liberation message there. And so they went about sharing it with people. And that's exactly, you know, how they got to meet with others and plot and plan. Denmark Vesey almost pulled off a rebellion that probably would have ended slavery. Then we have Harriet Tubman. As you see, we hear about Harriet Tubman all the time, but she was also a freedom fighter. There were over 750 documented rebellions by enslaved people. This is important to the legacy of Juneteenth because it tells us that for centuries, African people in the Americas fought for their freedom at every turn. And not just in the sense of we're going to go and hack people to pieces, which works too, but there were also other subtle ways of managing this. Poisoning food, causing people to become sick, snuffing babies, like all kind of things. Shout out to the resistors. I know it sounds violent, but there is nothing more violent than being human trafficked and being put into bondage and forced to endure some of the most heinous acts of savagery imaginable. Those people who did that got what they deserved. Ashe. All right. So when we talk about, like, let's move into the Civil War, right? So we got to talk about Civil War. What caused the Civil War? Well, a lot of things caused the Civil War. First, we got to talk about this election of Abraham Lincoln. Some people don't know that the Republican Party was newly formed at this time, right? A lot of times we're on social media and you hear the conservatives saying, oh, well, it was the Republicans that freed the slaves and all stuff like that. Relax. Abraham Lincoln used to be a Whig, okay? And then he moved over to the newly founded Republican Party, and he was like their first major representative, okay? So he lost his first election, came back, like, let's try it again, let's do it. His election was scary for folks because he had expressed anti-slavery sentiment already. And folks were like, well, if he gets, if he becomes president, he's going to try to get rid of it. So that was a big deal. They hated this, right? Economic differences between the North and the South. The North was about, they had their ideas about trade. The South had their ideas about trade. They could not agree. The issue of tariffs was coming up. There was all this kind of stuff. A lot of people don't really talk much about that when they talk about the Civil War, but this was a huge thing. And I'm not mad when people talk about things like the economic differences or something like political differences, right? Big versus small government, federal versus state, because that is real. And we can't just say it was all about slavery, because it wasn't. There was more going on here. And we know that because there were people in the northern states and who were in the Union who supported this big government and all these things, who like were enslavers. So it wasn't just about that. Okay. We also had this idea about national expansion. We're talking about the Missouri Compromise, and do we take slavery out to the West as we explore? The North said no, the South said yes. That was a big point of contention. But of course, slavery was the thing, okay? Not only just being divided on opinions about whether or not slavery should continue, but also being divided on opinions about the humanity of African people that they were enslaving, okay? And just so you know, a little tidbit, about 200,000 men of African descent fought in the war on both sides, various reasons, right? Many of them were like, we're going to fight for our freedom. We're going to fight for our, for ourselves and for the people that we love. Some people were offered, freedom in exchange for serving, and we'll get into that a little bit later. There were all kinds of reasons. Some of them were forced to do so by the people that owned them. Instead of them going themselves, they would send people that they owned, right, to go fight in this war. So we had about 200,000 men of African descent fighting in this civil war. All right. So I want to talk about this idea of gradual abolition and manumission. This is important, right? And so I have this here, like, why does this matter? This matters because it sets up a tone, and it sets up, this pathway to emancipation and liberation. What starts happening, and this is kind of like kicked off in Pennsylvania, right? The Gradual Abolition Act of 1780 was passed by the Pennsylvania General Assembly on March 1st, 1780, okay? They're starting to talk about ending slavery in the 18th century, right? That's important. Keep that in mind, because it's already saying there's a sentiment here that we don't like this. There's something wrong. There were some people who were like, this is wrong. Then there were some people saying, we don't like how it's helping the Southern economy. Like, there was a lot of things going on, right? The act gradually emancipated enslaved people without making slavery immediately illegal. Females would obtain their freedom at 18. Males would be freed at 21. Connecticut and Rhode Island did something similar. They could obtain their freedom at 25. New York did the same thing, modeling after Pennsylvania. Jersey became the last northern state to pass a graduate emancipation, where the women would work until they were 21 and the men until they're 25. That's how they were able to kind of not completely disrupt the economy, but to make sure that we could free these people, but we still need their labor, right? This is important, because over this time, if you're going from 1780 and you're thinking 1804, so we're talking about almost 25 years of rumbling in these different governments that are saying, we should not be doing this. Okay. Welcome in. I'm so happy you all are here. If you're here, hit that like button. Let me know that you're here. Just so you know, we will have Q&A later, so you don't have to worry about asking questions right now. Appreciate you here. I know this is doing picture in picture and it's cutting off some parts of my slides. I apologize for that. Shout out to everybody for being here. All right. January 1st, 1863, Emancipation Proclamation. This is one of the things that we are taught in, a standard United States education, and other places also teach it. What does it say? That on the first day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall be in the rebellion against the United States, shall be thenceforward and forever free. Okay? There's a whole lot of stipulating going on, right? Already, right? The executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain freedom of such persons, and will do no act or acts to repress such persons or any of them in any efforts they may make for their actual freedom. Okay? And you can see we've got an image. They've got copies of this. I believe it's in DC. They have this, like with other important documents, kind of faded or what have you, right? But there's more to this Emancipation Proclamation, and I want you to pay attention right now. And I hereby enjoin upon the people so declared to be free to abstain from all violence unless in necessary self-defense. And I recommend to them that in all cases when allowed, they labor faithfully for reasonable wages. So what had happened was, he said, if you are being held in bondage in a state that is rebelling against the United States, right? Because right after he got elected, shortly after he got elected, like 7 states seceded from the Union, right? So they were like, we out. We ain't doing this. We don't like this guy. We don't like this idea of this United States thing. They're trying to take our slavery, try to take our guns. We don't like that. And so Lincoln was like, all right, you don't like it. We're going to emancipate your enslaved people. And you know that without that labor, your economy is going to tank, right? So it's leverage, right? Did not say anything about enslaved people in the North. Didn't say anything about enslaved people in the Midwest or, it was only about the states that rebelled against the Union. But listen to this part. And I further declare and make known that such persons of suitable condition will be received into the armed service of the United States to garrison forts, positions, states, and other places, and to man vessels of all sorts in said service. And upon this act, sincerely believed to be an act of justice, warranted by the Constitution, upon military necessity, I invoke the considerate judgment of mankind and the gracious favor of Almighty God. I highlighted this because I think that this is a part of the Emancipation Proclamation that people don't often discuss, unless you're getting into these in-depth conversations. They needed troops. They needed people to fight. They were like, if we can emancipate these people that are being held in bondage, we can get some troops on our side to fight. Military necessity. That's important. Remember that. Because a lot of times we like to act like Lincoln, freed the slaves. He's all altruistic. Please, he did not like us. He wanted us to go back to Alkebulan. He wanted us to get the hell out. He was ready to set that up. Shout out to Liberia. You know what I'm saying? All right. So what happened with Juneteenth? Like, where does that come from? What is Juneteenth all about? Well, General Order 3, which you can see is here, right? It was brought by Major General Gordon Granger, and it said, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired laborer. Now, remember when Lincoln said that you should expect to work for wages, right? So the idea was, yes, you are emancipated and you are no longer in bondage, but you should still keep working. We're just going to make sure you get paid for it. The problem is the Confederacy's coffers were drained because of the war. So they didn't really even have money to pay the people if they wanted to stay. That became a source of contention. A lot of those wealthy families in the South lost their money in the war, right? So he's saying you're entitled to a job. They're saying we ain't got no money. So there's that. He says the freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present home and work for wages. I don't know. That don't sound like freedom to me. I got to stay with the people. I'm 25 years old, and for the last 25 years of my life, I have belonged to this person legally. They have beaten me, tortured me, ripped me from my family, and you're telling me I got to stay here and work? That's wild, son. I don't know about all that. They are informed that they are not allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness, either there or elsewhere. And that's, y'all, I need you to understand how important this line is in the history of America and capitalism and work. They told Black people that they had to work. You don't have a choice. And this shows up later on in the 20th century, where Black women were forced to work. They were not allowed to be stay-at-home moms and wives. They had to go and work because people needed their labor. And we often talk about this, but it goes back all the way here. Okay. So that's important. All right. All right. All right. So I got some stuff for you. You think that, oh, we got Emancipation Proclamation, we got, it's what was it, like 1863, and then it's taking time to get to people and all this stuff, and they're finding out. So who was freed? Who actually was freed? Did everybody know that they were freed? No, because they didn't have the internet, they didn't have phones. All they had was the Pony Express. All they had was the postal service. All they had were troops and folks on horses running around and handing out these things, right? So who was still enslaved? Enslaved people in the Union or the North. Enslaved people whose enslavers didn't bother to tell them, how I'm free and you don't tell me. Like, somebody help me understand how I'm free and you don't tell me. That's foul. It's foul. Enslaved people whose enslavers didn't believe they needed to honor Lincoln's proclamation because he wasn't their president. They stood on business like, that's cool, but we seceded. We are not part of this union. You can go head on with that, right? Can you imagine? Can you imagine when General Gordon comes through and says, you are here for free? And the person that owns you looks at you and is like, no, you're not. Get back to work. What do you do in that situation, right? Well, what was the last state to officially end slavery? Anybody know without going to Google? Anybody know? Anybody know? Anybody know? Okay, I'm going to tell you. Oh, wait, hold on one second. I got another click. Yes, December 18th, 1965, something else happened. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. By now, you should know that that was the 13th Amendment. That is what actually officially ended slavery. Right. So, yes, Emancipation Proclamation is out in 1863. They dropped the original. The remix comes out December 18th, 1965, kind of locking it in because, as I said, all them other people were not free. So for 2 years, you got folks in the North sitting there like, I know the hell I am not in New York. I'm joking. New York was done by then. But you know what I mean? Like, there were still people who were held in bondage because that. So the last state to officially end slavery, y'all, New Jersey. How many people knew it was New Jersey? New Jersey. January 23rd, 1866. I told you that date would come back. A lot of people think it's Mississippi. A lot of people think it's Texas. I see you in the chat. A lot of people think that it's someplace in the South. Nope, it is New Jersey, the Garden State. They did not ratify the 13th Amendment until January 23rd, 1866. And that is why Jersey is the armpit of America. Okay. I just like throwing that in there because I think that that's an important tidbit to know. Jersey was like, all right. So Juneteenth, we know, right? That's why we're all here. Juneteenth is tomorrow. And it's not the only Emancipation Day. And I think that that's important, right? Because yes, Juneteenth has become a collective celebration, and it really does reflect kind of the end of slavery. And even when the details don't necessarily line up, even though we know that June 19th, 1865, there were still people that were enslaved, okay, it's still our collective day. However, it's nice to acknowledge that other places have Emancipation Days that are celebrated to this day, right? Washington, D.C., it's April 16th. That was in 1862. I'm going to take a sip of my drink. Throat getting a little dry. It's okay. Maryland is November 1st, 1864, and it was actually began recognizing it in 2013. So if you didn't know that, if you're a Maryland resident, your state celebrates Emancipation Day on November 1st. Virginia was April 3rd. Mississippi, May 8th. It's also called 8 of May. So you might hear some folks in the deep country referred to as 8 of May. Florida is May 20th. That's probably the biggest Emancipation Day outside of Juneteenth. A lot of Floridians grew up celebrating Emancipation Day, particularly in Tampa and surrounding areas. That was a pretty big deal. Georgia, May 29th. Okay. It's celebrated the Saturday closest to May 29th. So whatever that day happens to be. Texas, we know June 19th, 1865. That was Galveston, Texas. That is marked there. And if you don't know, I should have probably said this before, that Juneteenth is a combination of June and 19. Juneteenth, because Black folks and Ebonics are brilliant. I love it. And then Tennessee and Kentucky were August 8th, 1865. So the narrative that the last slaves or the last enslaved people to find out that they were free were in Galveston, Texas, is not true. Okay. There were people in Upson County, Georgia, that didn't find out until about 2 months after the war had ended, right? This is important to know, y'all. Like, we're going to tell the truth, you know? And so I get it's all about celebration. I get it's about honoring. And again, I love Juneteenth. But historically, that is not the last. They were not the last people to find out that they were free. Okay. So how do we celebrate this, right? So there are celebrations all over the United States. I think that is important because a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, don't listen to anybody but folks from Texas. And I'm just like, well, why? There's millions of people in Texas who have no idea what this is about. And if they've heard of it, they've probably never celebrated it. But, you know, outside of Texas, Black folks are celebrating Juneteenth across the country, right? Some of the places that have some of the biggest celebrations, of course, Galveston does. Also Houston, also Dallas, Fort Worth, right? That's big. Philadelphia has huge. We are in the throes of Philly doing Juneteenth, and Philly does Juneteenth, I swear, the whole month. It's great. I'm going to a block party tomorrow. There was stuff on the weekend. I mean, there's tons of events. This is a big deal here in Philly. Washington, D.C. also does Juneteenth big. Auburn, New York, which was the last place that Harriet Tubman lived, has a big celebration for Juneteenth. Atlanta does as well. But the one that might surprise some people, unless they're from here, is Milwaukee. Milwaukee has like probably the largest Juneteenth celebrations outside of Texas, right? And why is that? Well, Dr. Ronald Myers, who and wait, I got hold on, I got slides. Look, Dr. Reverend Doctor, is Myers. He is the founder of the National Association of Juneteenth Lineage, and he has a lot to do with how we celebrate Juneteenth today, right? And he is from Milwaukee. And so Milwaukee does it big, okay? And then you've got Sister Opal Lee, who is the godmother of Juneteenth, and she's from the Fort Worth area. This woman fought so hard. She's been fighting her whole life because when she was 12 years old, 1939, I believe, Juneteenth, her family was celebrating, and they got attacked. Their house was like burned down, and that stuck with her. And so she, that became her life mission, to make sure that the world knows about Juneteenth, that people know to celebrate it, and that has been her mission. And Sister Opal Lee has been fighting for Juneteenth to be a federal holiday forever. And I'm so glad that her work was not in vain. But Dr. Myers and Opal Lee together, they are why we have a federal holiday celebrating Juneteenth. They are why so many people know about it. And, shout out to them. Ashe, our people in the struggle. Okay. So now that Juneteenth is a federal holiday, what should we do? And this is particularly for white folks, because y'all know how y'all are. Y'all be like, what do we do? I don't know what to do. I'm white. Yeah, you are white. And that's okay. That's okay. Juneteenth, I'm sorry, and y'all see this ignorant picture. It's the blackest thing I could find. I had to do it. It's got watermelon, it's got fried chicken, it's got Maker's Mark. It should have had Hennessy. If it had Hennessy, that picture would have been perfect. But anyway, so what are some things that people do? Eat watermelon. Why is watermelon important? I love talking about watermelon. Because there are those among us, right, whose minds are still enslaved and believe that there's a such thing as slave food or whatever, and they don't like what I don't eat watermelon. I don't like it. Shut up. Watermelon is great. Watermelon nourished those ancestors who escaped from slavery. All of those, like the minstrel images that you see where they have us, eating watermelon and stuff, finding us in the patches. Well, they were ridiculing us running away and them finding us in patches, nourishing ourselves with watermelon, right? Because what is watermelon? It is water, right? And so we would eat the watermelons. They were easy to open, drop them on the ground. They would split, pull them open and eat them, and you go on your way. So watermelon sustains our rebellious ancestors, and so it is a wonderful thing to do. And you should eat it just in honor of them. I don't care if you don't like the taste. You just kind of eat it in honor of them. You know how Jewish folks have a Seder, and each food that they eat represents, some part of their ancestors' journey. Eat the damn watermelon. All right. You want to drink things like strawberry soda or lemonade. Red Kool-Aid works. Okay. When I say red, it could be whichever one comes out red. Okay. Eat red velvet cake. And why are we eating watermelon, red Kool-Aid, strawberry soda, velvet cake? The color red symbolizes the blood that was shed by our ancestors in the fight for freedom, in their bondage, and we are honoring that bloodshed in that way. You want to eat things like black-eyed peas, collard greens, yams. These are foods that are associated with prosperity. So you know how in January 1st, many African Americans and other people of the African diaspora will eat collard greens and black-eyed peas for wealth and prosperity throughout the year. You can also do this on Juneteenth. And it's really great to kind of get together and kind of meditate and manifest that prosperity, right? You wear red and green, or wear, your shirts that say Juneteenth and you're proud, right? I've got a few Juneteenth shirts. I love wearing them. Wearing red and green, again, green prosperity, red for the bloodshed. You want to attend parades, cookouts, festivals. I implore you, especially now that it's a federal holiday, more cities and towns are starting to recognize Juneteenth and have functions like parades and festivals and major cookouts and things like that. But also remember that you don't have to do it on a big scale. It could be you and your family getting together for a cookout, similar to Kwanzaa, how Kwanzaa often brings families together and it's really a time of reflection and building community. You can use Juneteenth for that time. Participate in educational program. If you are watching this, then that is exactly what you are doing. You came here to learn more about Juneteenth. And that's always a great thing. And then spread that knowledge, right? So if you've learned things, you can go to your job, you can go to your family, you can go to your friends and say, hey, I learned some really interesting things about Juneteenth. I want to share them with you. Do some form of community service. Similar to Martin Luther King Day, there are a lot of folks who take the time and they're like, you know what, I want to do something for my community. And so you can also look locally and see what opportunities there are for Juneteenth celebrations and community service and all of that kind of stuff. All right. All right. So now I want to open it up for Q&A. I also have the donation list on there if you want. This is a pay what you can thing. So I am on CashApp at FemJones. I'm on Venmo at FemJones. And I'll open it up for Q&A, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. So what do you all think? Anybody have any questions? You want to put them in the chat? I'm happy to answer questions. Oh, one thing I wanted to make sure I did, because I wrote down some things I want to make sure that you all get those. Okay, so it's a couple of books that you can look at. Where did I put them? Oh, well, I'll get to that anyway. Anybody have a question? Put a question in the chat. That'll help me very much. Oh, so another thing I want y'all to know, because it's important for me to always highlight the savagery of white folks in the antebellum South. There were people, and this is very upsetting, so just prepare for what I'm about to say. There were people who refused to emancipate and manumit their the people they enslaved. And instead of freeing them, they killed them. So there are historians who have looked into this and have said that it would be better to be in hell than to be in Texas after they got the notification about freedom, because so many enslavers had actually shuttled people to Texas. They were Arkansas, Missouri, all these other places as the war was descending and the Union troops were descending and things like that. They were shuttling their folks to Texas because they knew that Texas was putting up a strong resistance to emancipation. And so they would send them there. And rather than free them and allow them to live as free people, they killed them. Just another data point to remind you that white American history is a history of savagery and vile disgustingness. But anyway, okay. So how did the colors of the flag get so confusing? Pan-African colors versus red, white, and blue. So there is a Juneteenth flag. And the Juneteenth flag, so let me see if I can pull it back up again. Let me see, because I'll show you. Let's go back to the beginning here. Is it gonna let me go back to the beginning? Okay, let's go to slide number 1. All right, so if we look at this flag, right? So this arch here kind of represents the horizon. The blood is for the people, the bloodshed or what have you. This burst is a burst of hope, right? This is the flag of Juneteenth. People use the Pan-African flag because, and when I do advertising, I only use red, black, green, and yellow anyway, when it comes to this stuff, unless I'm using my purple. But people do that as a way of saying, like, yes, this is a holiday that is important in African American history, but it is important to people across the diaspora. We should care about every Emancipation Day. Emancipation Day in Jamaica, Emancipation Day in Nigeria, Emancipation Day wherever it is celebrated. We should all, we should be celebrating all of that, and we should be recognizing all of that, because colonizers just dropped us off at different ports. We're all the same people. Like, we come from the same places, we bring the same traditions. This is why you have plantains, plantains, plantanos. They're all the same. It's the same thing. You have red rice, you have jollof rice, you've got rice and beans. Like, it's all the same, right? They just dropped us off at different ports. And so I feel like when people are using Pan-African colors or Pan-African things, I think it's an attempt to expand and to make sure that, like, everybody knows this is all about all of us. Because any of us enslaved anywhere, we're all, you know what I mean? It's like, we're not free until all of us are free. Thank you, Maxine, saying this was excellent. What books can we read to delve further into our study of Juneteenth? Yes, and I have the notes here somewhere. I wrote them down. Yes, okay, boom. Because there's so many, right? A lot of times when you look at those Juneteenth reading lists, it'll be like 1619 Project or something by Ibrahim Kendi, and no disrespect to them, but it's not about Juneteenth, and it's not about Juneteenth. So Annette Gordon Reed has a book called On Juneteenth, okay? Look into that. We've got the Juneteenth, the story behind the celebration, and that's by Edward Cotham, Cotham. And then we've got Juneteenth, the history and legacy of the holiday that commemorates the end of slavery in the South by Charles River. I recommend that one for sure. These are 3 experts on Juneteenth, and they write about this. And that, again, this kind of speaks to why I get a little prickly when people are like, "Oh, you should only be listening to people from Texas about Juneteenth." That is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense because um, there are people who have studied this. Like, they are experts in this. And they are the scholars, and they are the activists, and they are the community folks who have put Juneteenth on the map. And they not all of them are from Texas, okay? New York City, Harlem has a huge Juneteenth celebration. I'm from New York. I don't know how I forgot to mention it earlier. Harlem has one of the biggest Juneteenth celebrations in the country. That's where I learned about Juneteenth. I used to go to that damn Juneteenth parade every year, 125th Street. Shout out to Harlem, right? Does that mean because we're not from Texas, from the Bronx, that we are not experts in celebrating Juneteenth? Because I know folks from Texas who would have no idea what to do on Juneteenth to celebrate. So I just don't like that idea. He said this has been great. First heard about it. James Joyce, Bloomsday is more recently than I will. I do appreciate you all for coming. If you missed any part of this, it will be on my Emancipation Jones YouTube page. I hope that folks are able to come in. I might see if I can edit it and edit out like the first 6 minutes or so of me fumbling and trying to figure this out. But I do appreciate you all coming, and I appreciate the support. So the one thing that I wanted to make sure that I let people know is that I run a program called Sankofa Summer School, and Sankofa Summer School is an Afrocentric academy designed to educate people about these kinds of things. I just want to put this back up in case more people want to pay what you can. And I am always looking for financial support and stuff because I have people that come in and that they teach these great classes. They do workshops just like these. This year, we are doing it from July 29th to August 9th. I have some amazing courses lined up for this year. I'm very excited about this. And I decided to fold this into Sankofa Summer School because, again, Afrocentric education is so important. And, excuse me, if you go to sankofasummerschool.com, I'll put it in the chat. sankofasummerschool.com, and you can visit that. But when we're doing a pay what you can model this year. The last times that we did Sankofa Summer School, we had people register and pay a certain amount per class. But in my attempts to expand that, I'm making it pay what you can. And so my hope is that, people don't feel bad. Like, okay, you may not have $25 right now because the economy is what it is, but maybe you have $1. And if you have $1, that dollar helps, and it goes towards supporting the programming and compensating my instructors for their labor. And we are doing an in-person parenting and family workshop now, so that money goes towards buying refreshments for that and advertising and things like that. I appreciate you, Tony, saying I think almost daily about the things I learned in Sankofa Summer School classes. I really appreciate you. So this year, it is going to be a pay what you can model. And so when I put it up here, if you thought that this was helpful, if you thought that this was beneficial, I also have PayPal. Let me put my PayPal in the chat too. It's supposed to be paypal.me, right? Yeah. Because I know some folks overseas will be like, well, I can't do the Cash App and Venmo. That's fine. So anything that you contribute is always helpful, and I really appreciate it. And I look forward to Sankofa Summer School. I look forward to being able to teach this. So thank you all very much for being here. You can share this with people. Let them know that you came, that you enjoyed it, that it was informative, and then you can share it with people. And I really appreciate you all being here and coming to learn more about Juneteenth. Take care.